This is the plaintiff, James White. He says he hired the defendant to do some work around his yard. He paid him, and the louse never finished the job. He now has to hire another landscaper to complete the work, and is suing for the $750 it's now going to cost him. This is the defendant, Chris. He says he completed this guy's job in November and was paid, and his workers were given tips. Then, 3 months later, the plaintiff says he wants all his money back. Huh? He worked hard for the plaintiff, and so did his guys, and he owes nothing. He's accused of not finishing up.
All parties, please raise your right hands.
Welcome back to the People's Court. Next case on the docket. The plaintiff says that he hired the defendant to do some yard work around his house. The guy never finished, and he ended up having to hire somebody else to complete the job. Now, the defendant says he completed all the work. He was paid in full. He got a tip from the guy, and now he's being sued. Are you kidding? It's the case of 10-yard penalty.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
All right, Mr. White. You hired the defendant's landscaping company to do some work in your yard. What did you hire them to do?
I was having my house renovated. I'm going to, and it's a fairly big project. So I was going to have a shed put in. And what I needed him to do and hired him to do was to put in a shed pad and to clear out a large group of ivy, some shrubs, a pear tree, and an old chain link fence that was all rusted out and had been there probably for 60 years.
Okay.
And that was the plan. And I looked up how could I find a landscaper. I looked on the web. He had a pretty good website. He's a local guy. So I called him up. He said he could come over and give me an estimate. And he could come that day, which was fine. So he did. And the estimate came in at, excuse me, $2552.70.
Okay, now that would be for the shed pad, which is a concrete pad, right?
No. That would have been for all of the work.
So he was going to do that and the yard cleanup.
Right.
Right. Now, at some point, he decides that you have to hire somebody else for the shed pad, that it isn't really something he's comfortable doing. And then the two of you agree that you're going to pay $1,500 for the yard cleanup, right?
Actually, not completely correct. No. We agreed that he was going to do the whole project, the shed pad and all of the yard work. And then when they came to do the work, which was the third week of December, he told me he came with a small crew. They did most of the ivy, but not all. They did the fence. This took about a day and a half. And they took down the shrubs and the tops of the shrubs down to a stump and the pear tree down to a stump. So he came, and with a small crew, they worked for a day and a half, and they got to that stage. And on that second day, he tells me he's never done a shed pad before, but that one of the guys who had worked on the pear tree knew all about it. He was also a landscaper, and that they would be able to do it. And he came back, because he wasn't there that morning, and said, okay, we can do the shed pad. We can do it this week, the Thursday and the Friday, but I'd have to give me a new estimate, which he did. And
so at the end of the day, the only thing you employed the defendant for was for the yard cleanup, right?
Yeah, but he was going to come Thursday and Friday and do the shed pad.
Who was? A different person or the defendant?
No, Chris and this other worker of his.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the plan. They're going to come back that Thursday to finish the ivy, get out the stumps, get rid of the last poles of the chain link fence, which they left across the street, and do the shed pad. That Thursday, which was December 17th, it snowed. So they didn't come. That was always the idea. If it snowed, they weren't going to come that day. We would just do it afterwards. And from that moment forward, he ghosted me. I've never heard from him again. He's never answered the phone calls, never answered any of my texts.
Do you have pictures of the chain link? I see the stumps. You were talking about something about the fence across the street. What is it you're saying there?
He was supposed to take the chain link fence down, which he did, and he was supposed to take it to a dump, and he was a commercial dump. Instead, he put it across the street on Town of Oyster Bay land and never took them away.
Let me hear from you, Mr. Chris. What's going on? Did you guys dump the fence across the street instead of taking it with you? So
I took the fence. I mean, I guess there was a few pieces left behind that we forgot about, but I mean, I should have brought it up, but I did go to the scrapyard and I did take everything to the scrapyard
I don't know. What am I seeing then
the-
across the street? It's not a few pieces.
That
What I'm seeing across the street is
Right.
a lot. Like, what's that?
I mean, that's not the entirety of the chain link fence. I mean, there's chain
Well,
link
none
fence
of it
right in
should
the
be
whole
dumped
backyard.
across the street from your client's house, should it? I mean, that's like a fine
No.
of $1,000, and you're not supposed. It's also disgusting. People who live there in that neighborhood don't want some old chain link fence thrown there, and you're not supposed to do that at all. It's not that you left some chain link fence on his property. It's that you illegally dumped it across the street. That's what he's accusing you of.
I'm not saying we didn't leave them there, but I mean, it wasn't my intention to just dump them there.
But what was your intention when you just dumped them there, if not to just dump them there?
We didn't.
Why move them off the plaintiff's property at all?
Right.
If you're moving it off his property, it's because you figure you're doing this when you're dumping it. That's what dumping means. All right, talk to me about the stumps. Were you supposed to grind those stumps?
So that was the one part of the job that I told him I couldn't do. I couldn't grind the stumps. I told him that I can cut them down, but I never said that I can grind them. That was the one thing we couldn't do.
Let me look at the agreement that you have with the defendant. Overgrowth removal.
Right.
There's a
And then I have
clarifying
everything in
email.
the
And then dump fees, $150.
right. So that was for all the biodegradable stuff, like the tree, the ivy,
So you
everything
actually
like
charged him for
the dump fee.
dump fees,
Not
and then you
that-
dumped it across. You dumped part of it across the street.
The chain link fence was different. No, I'm charging him for the dump fees for taking the tree, the ivy, the shrubs, everything like that.
What happened with the shed pad?
I told him like he said earlier, like I didn't really know. I never done something like that before, so someone who worked with me had experience doing it, so he talked to him.
You had a contract with him to do that, and then you just never did it. You never came back to his house.
Well,
because that's a bad look too.
Right. Well, I told him I wasn't interested in doing it.
When did you tell him that?
I told him over the phone one day because I did tell him that I was going to Florida for the winter, so I did tell him that I wasn't interested in doing that job anymore.
Okay.
Because then it snowed. It snowed like he said, and then a few days went by, and then we were just done for the season. We just weren't working anymore.
Mr. White, let me ask you a question. What makes you think that the grinding of stumps was included in the overgrowth removal? Because typically speaking, when grinding of stumps is part of the project, it's delineated that the grinding of stumps are part of the project. Why? Because you got to rent a machine to grind stumps, and it's hard. And it's not usually part of just cleaning up a yard. All that your invoice says, and that kind of serves as your contract here, is it just says overgrowth removal. It doesn't say.
No, actually, this is an ad that Chris's company puts out, and it specifically mentions bush and tree removal.
Right.
Anyone could, two parts to that. Generally, if somebody says, I'm going to remove a tree, it wouldn't be something where he says, I'll cut it to whatever part I want and you do the rest. Removal suggests that the whole tree, and those are the words he used when we discussed it, where he says everything we discussed. Secondly, we were going to have a shed pad put in at the spot where the pear tree was. Were we going to have the stump stick up in the middle of the shed? It's not possible. It doesn't make sense.
Was the shed going to be exactly where the pear tree stump was?
Yeah, so I do remember him telling me that he did want the pad to be like in the corner of the yard where that pear tree was. So
The shed to be in the corner of the yard.
Yeah, the pad. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So what was the plan with that stump? Let's assume that you weren't going to Florida, weren't sick of the snow, and had stuck around and wanted to do that job. Then who would have removed the stump then?
So I told him that we never were moving the stumps. I said we can cut it down to ground level possibly
How
to
would
do
you
the pad.
put the shed bed on top of the stump?
So if the stump was cut to ground level, that would be the best we can do. If it was cut to ground level, like even with the ground, and then we could just put the pad on top of it.
Let me just say that if you're not including stump grinding, you should be putting it in your contract, stump grinding not included, so that there is no debate. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, Mr. White?
I probably had thought to include dump fees in the suit, but I couldn't quantify the amount. And
Where is
the
the chain link fence right now? Is it still across the street?
Oh yeah, right this moment. Yeah, I took those photos recently.
Oh my goodness!
But I had asked the guy who gave me the other bid.
Why don't you call the city and squeal on the defendant and tell them that he's the one who left it there? You'll see how fast they go pick it up. He'll probably make the time for you and go pick it up. Go pick up the chain link fence that is in front of his house. Don't leave it there. Go pick it up, Mr. Chris. Got it?
Yes.
Okay. Otherwise, you know what you can do to remedy that, Mr. White. All right. So the question is, are you entitled to any money back, and how much money are you entitled to back? A lot of your case is based on the stump grinding, which I disagree. I do disagree with you on that. Usually stump grinding is specifically mentioned. It is a real hassle, and it can only be done with a special machine. Okay, so removal of a tree can mean chopping down a tree. Then the tree's gone, but the stump is still there. I agree with you that it is much better practice for a landscaper to say, I am not grinding your stump, that'll cost you another X. But I am also of the opinion that grinding is usually specifically quoted. And, your entire invoice, just says overgrowth removal. That's all it says. So I don't think...
Well, there was a note...
Mr. Chris, this is the part where I'm agreeing with you, so I don't know why you're shouting out. Okay. So I don't think that you're entitled to that. However, I am very unimpressed with the fence across the street. I am unimpressed with ghosting you for all that time. What did you want to say, Mr. Chris? You were trying to interrupt to say something.
No, I did talk to him on the phone.
Talk to who?
Mr. White.
And after you never came back?
Well, no. Well, the phone call was, he called me and he was demanding all the money back for the whole job, the money back. And I just kind of felt like that was kind of ridiculous. He wasn't asking me to come back. He wasn't asking me for part of the money back. He just demanded all the money back.
So let's say that instead...
I have to interrupt.
So let's say that...
True.
Hold on one second. So let's say that instead of demanding all his money back, he said, I think you should pay me back some of the money. What would you have thought was appropriate for the job left undone when you guys didn't come back?
I don't think any of it. I mean, the only thing, which I will say I'm wrong, is about the fence. The stumps, I really don't think that... I should have came back for that. I mean, everything else, I think was done. I mean, that's the one thing I'll say I was wrong in.
So tell me what you guys did do.
So there was a lot of, I don't know how long that property wasn't touched. I think he told me about 20, 25 years, he said.
Do you have pictures of the job before you did it and after you did it?
This is the one job I did not take pictures for. Usually take pictures
every. The one where you need it?
I know. I didn't think it was going to come to this.
Yeah, but you're a contractor who should be taking pictures before and after every job. And it's not even hard now. You don't have to bring a camera. You just go with your phone. There's just no reason for you not to do it.
I know.
All right, the $750 that you're suing for is entirely for removing the stumps and cleaning the ivy. Because here's the receipt for it from the other landscapers. I'm going to order the return of some money. It's not going to be $750. I'm going to order the return of some money, not for the stumps, because I agree with him, but for the fact that the fence wasn't taken away and you've had to live with that thing across your street all this time, and whatever remainder of the ivy wasn't taken down. I'm ordering the return of $250 verdict for the plaintiff.
So the plaintiff just gets a third of what he was seeking. He gets $250 rather than $750. Chris, the judge is pretty upset with you for what you did, but not the stump grinding. How do you feel about the outcome? You got to give him back $250.
I'm a little bit upset with the outcome, but I mean, I have no problem going back and taking it.
All right. That's the outcome it's going to be, and you're going to have to live with that. Mr. White, you're not getting quite what you wanted, but you're getting $250 back, the judge says. You think that's fair enough?
I'm surprised at the outcome. I actually thought the case was much clearer. I guess I'm just surprised.
All right, thank you. That's her decision, and you got to live with it. Harvey, what do you think?
So, Doug, it's really simple that when you have something like this, a landscaping agreement, you have to put down the scope of work. That is just the holy grail here. Write down exactly what has to be done, and then you can go to the judge and you can say, here it is, Your Honor, here's what was done, and here's what wasn't.
Hello, judges. Whenever I hear a litigant say, you can't prove it, I hear, I did it, but you can't prove it. Has this statement ever affected your view of a case?
Yeah, when someone uses the unfortunate phrase, "You can't prove that,"
Right.
it sounds exactly the way that viewer.
There's like an undercurrent of guilt.
I did it, but you can't prove it.
Right.
And sometimes, sometimes it's a slippery slope when you're assuming that people have your same, language skills, or that
Right.
you're, if the person were telling the truth, they'd be crying right now, or not everybody reacts the same way to things.
You can't generalize that way.
But
No.
typically speaking, when someone is so sassy that they're saying, "You can't prove it, prove it,"
Right.
that's usually a really bad sign.
It's like
for
they're
a
daring
judge.
you to prove it.
Yeah,
and
they're daring you. They
not
have figured out that there's no proof, so now they're going to say whatever they can say and get away with.
You're going to rub the judge the wrong way and
Yeah.
maybe the jury the wrong way. And
Yeah.
another thing that sometimes you hear in the courtroom, if you're a judge, is a witness who's testifying, and then all of a sudden it's the answer to a question isn't just the answer. It's, well, to be perfectly honest, or
That's just
honestly.
You want me to be honest? No, I put you
Right.
under oath because I don't want you to be
Right,
honest.
right. And
that's just annoying, though. But that's not an indication of lying.
Usually not.
No.
Usually not. But you almost want to reach out and go, of course I want you to be honest, for God's sake. That didn't need saying.
Yeah.